We are going to Egypt. Not the Egypt of the postcards, not the pyramids at Giza, not the gold of the pharaohs 1,000 years dead. We are going to the coast, to Alexandria, the greatest city in the world, in the summer of 30 BC, and we are going inside one sealed stone building on the harbour, into a locked upper chamber where the last pharaoh of Egypt is still alive. It is August. The heat comes off the stone in waves, and Cleopatra the 7th, 40 years into a life and 22 into a reign, is sitting on a golden couch in her full royal regalia, waiting. She has bathed, she has eaten, she has dressed as a queen for the last time, because she has decided this is the last time. Outside the door, close enough that she can hear them shift their weight on the stone, stand Roman soldiers. They are not there to kill her. That is the strange, terrible detail you have to hold on to. They are there to keep her alive. 2 women are in the room with her. Eras, who has arranged her hair since she was a girl. Karmion, who is even now adjusting the heavy diadem on her mistress's brow, straightening it, as if the crown will be inspected. The 3 of them barely speak. There is nothing to say that has not already been decided. A knock at the outer door, a guard's voice. A man from the countryside has come with a gift for the queen. A basket, he says. A basket of figs, fresh, the leaves still on them. The soldiers open the basket. They look inside. Ripe fruit, green leaves, nothing else. They laugh a little. One of the guards takes a fig, and they wave the man through. He carries the basket up the stairs, into the chamber, and he sets it down on the floor beside the golden couch. Cleopatra looks at the basket. She reaches down toward the leaves, black, to understand what is actually happening in that room, what she is reaching for, and whether the story you think you know about the next 60 seconds is true at all. We have to go back, not to the figs, not even to Alexandria. We have to go back 2,000 years, to the moment a defeated Roman general realized he had a problem and invented a snake to solve it. Because this is not a retelling of the most famous suicide in history. This is a case file. Somewhere in the received account of Cleopatra's death, the asp, the fig basket, the bared arm, the venom-like sleep, there is a lie, and it is not a small one. It is the single most repeated fact about any queen who ever lived, and when you lay the evidence out on the table, side by side, it does not survive first contact. The snake does not fit the body. The snake does not fit the room. The snake does not even fit the snake. And the man who profited most from her being dead is the same man who first showed Rome the image of the serpent, and then wrote the only history that survived. This is a channel where we take the women history filed under cursed, mad, barren, or in Cleopatra's case, whore, and we read the evidence back, the actual documents, the actual forensics, under the cartoon. So if that is the history you came here for, the real ruler under the legend, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. Because the end is where this one turns. The end is where you find out that the most famous thing you know about this woman was, almost certainly, the last move in a war she had already lost. Let me tell you the story the way it has been told for 2,000 years. Because before we take it apart, you have to feel how good it is. Alexandria has fallen. The war is over, and she lost it. Her partner Mark Antony is dead. He ran on his own sword when he was told, falsely, that she was already gone, and he died in her arms, or close to them, hauled up on ropes into the same fortified mausoleum where she had barricaded herself with the treasure of Egypt. Octavian, the young Roman heir who beat them both, now holds the city. And Cleopatra, the last of a dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, is his prisoner. She will not be led through Rome in chains. That is the thing she cannot bear. Octavian intends to march her down the sacred way in his victory parade, the Queen of Egypt, in fetters, for the crowd to jeer at. She has seen this done. She knows exactly what it looks like, and she decides that it will not be done to her. So, the story goes, She chooses her own ending, and she chooses it like a queen. She bathes, she dresses in the regalia of a pharaoh. She writes a letter to Octavian and sends it, asking one thing, to be buried beside Antony. Then she waits for the basket. A loyal countryman carries in figs, and hidden beneath the fruit and the leaves is an asp, the sacred serpent of Egypt, the very cobra that rears on the crown of the pharaohs. She bares her arm, she lets it strike, and the venom takes her softly, without a struggle, like slipping into sleep. Her two women go with her, the same way. When Octavian's men break down the door, they find Cleopatra laid out on the golden couch, crowned, composed, not a mark of terror on her, and Kar Meon, swaying, dying on her feet, still reaching up to straighten the diadem one last time. A Roman shouts at her, "Carmion, is this well done?" And she answers, with her last breath, "It is well done, and fitting for a princess, descended from so many kings." Then she falls. It is perfect. Do you feel how perfect it is? A queen who cannot be conquered, conquers even death. She dies free, on her own terms, sealed with the serpent that was the emblem of Egyptian royalty itself. Even Octavian, they say, was moved by her lofty spirit. And that is exactly the problem, because a death this perfect isn't a death, it's a design. And once you know what to look for, you can see the seams. Now, before we go any further, I need to name the thing I am going to make you wait for, because it is the question underneath all of this, and I am not going to answer it until the end. Cleopatra and Antony were buried together. That is not legend, that is in the sources. Octavian himself gave the order. The two of them, laid to rest in royal state, somewhere in or just outside Alexandria. And that tomb, the grave of the most famous couple in the ancient world, has never been found. It is lost. It has been lost for 2,000 years, under earthquakes, under the sea, under a living modern city. Where Cleopatra's body is right now, nobody knows. But someone is looking. There is a dig on the Egyptian coast that has been running for 2 decades, and it is turning up things that should not be there if it were nothing. Coins with her face. A tunnel cut through rock toward the sea. A sunken harbour. I am going to come back to that dig, and to what it has actually found, at the very end of this video. So if you are enjoying this so far, do me one favour that actually helps. Hit that like button, because it tells YouTube to put this in front of other people who would want the real story instead of the cartoon, and it means you will be here when I open the file on that tomb. Hold that, the lost grave. We are coming back to it. Now, the snake. Let me introduce you to the animal the entire story depends on, and let me put it back exactly where the legend swears it was, in that basket, on the stone floor, beside the golden couch, in the room we just left in the dark. The asp of the legend is, in nearly every serious reading, the Egyptian cobra, Na-ya-ha-ye, the great serpent of the Nile. So picture it honestly, coiled under the figs. This is not a ribbon of a thing you could fold into your palm and slip under a napkin. Andrew Gray, the curator of herpetology at the Manchester Museum, a man whose whole job is these animals, puts the typical length at 5 to 6 feet, and they can reach 8 feet. Now go back to the door we watched a few minutes ago, where the guards opened that basket, laughed, took a fig, and waved the countryman through. Put 8 feet of thick, live, frightened cobra under that thin layer of fruit and leaves, and carry it up a flight of stairs, past armed Roman soldiers whose one job that night is to keep this woman alive. The basket shifts, the leaves stir, the snake moves the way a big snake moves. A single guard glances twice, and the whole plan is a dead queen's guard holding a live cobra. It cannot be done. Not the hiding, not the carry, not the calm walk up the stairs. On the real floor of that real room, the fig basket is not a smuggling plan. It is a storyteller's prop. That is number 1 on the scoreboard, and I want you to keep count with me, because by the end, There are going to be several, and at the end, I am going to run them all again at once. Number 1. The snake is too big for the basket. Here is number 2, and to feel the weight of it, you have to stay on that floor. Say the smuggling somehow worked. The basket is down beside the couch, the leaves part, and the queen bears her arm the way every painting shows her. The cobra strikes. And 9 times out of 10, nothing happens. Grey again, with a cobra bite, there's just a 10% chance you would die, because most bites are dry bites. The mouth closes, the fangs go in, and no venom comes. So run the likeliest version of that scene forward, not the painted one. The snake strikes, injects nothing, and now there is a live 8-foot cobra loose on the stone of a sealed room, a queen with a swelling, throbbing arm, and no dignified death at all, 2 terrified women against the wall, and Roman soldiers a few feet away who are about to hear furniture scrape and a woman cry out. That is the probable scene the method actually delivers, not serene sovereignty. A botched, exposed, undignified panic, the exact opposite of the one thing she was reaching for. Nobody stakes the last thing they own, control of their own ending, on a strike that fails 9 times out of 10. That is number 2. The snake doesn't even work most of the time. And number 3 is the one the room itself makes impossible, because, and this is where the romantic version goes quiet, she does not die alone in it. When the Romans finally break down that door, they do not find 1 body on the floor. They find 3. Iras is already dead at the queen's feet. Meon is still on her feet but going, swaying, heavy-handed, as Plutarch has it, her hands still lifted to straighten the diadem, and then she too goes down. 3 grown women, dead or dying in the same small room, in the same few minutes. So stand in the middle of that room and ask the single snake to account for all 3. For one cobra to have put those 3 bodies on that floor, it would have had to find, and strike, and fully envenomate 3 separate people, one after another, 3 lethal doses in a row, when the base rate of injecting any venom at all is 1 in 10, and when, as Gray points out, snakes ration their venom deliberately, conserving it, spending it in times of need. A cobra does not empty itself into the queen on the couch, and then cross the floor to hunt down Eras, and then Meon, landing 2 more clean, fatal strikes on command. 1 reliably lethal cobra bite is already a long shot. 3, in sequence, in that one room, is not a long shot. It is effectively impossible. That is number 3. And standing over the 3 bodies, it is the loudest of all. 3 dead women, 1 snake, cannot be done. 3 deaths from 1 shared method is not the signature of a shared snake. It is the signature of a shared cup. 1 draught, passed from hand to hand in that hot, shut room, that each of the 3 could drink in the same hour. Hold that cup in your mind. It is going to matter more than any other single thing in this video, and I promise you, I will come back and name exactly what was in it. Now, number 4, kneel down with the Romans over the body they say they found, because the sources describe the one thing an Egyptian cobra could never leave behind. They find a queen who looks asleep, crowned, composed, laid out on the couch, not a mark of terror on her. Cobra venom does not make that body. It is largely neurotoxic. It takes a person apart by degrees. Drooping eyelids, drooling, a throat that will not swallow, vomiting, the slow climb of paralysis, and where the tissue-destroying components take hold, Gray notes, the venom causes necrosis. It kills the flesh around the wound. And it kills quite slowly. So the body a real cobra leaves behind is swollen, fouled, disfigured, and hours in the making. That is not the body in the legend. The serene, sleeping queen the sources hand us is the single death an Egyptian cobra is least able to give. Kneel there beside her, and the calm body is not evidence for the snake. It is the loudest evidence against it. That is number 4. Let me pause on something here, because we have been counting like coroners, and I do not want you to lose the woman in the arithmetic. If you have ever had a doctor, or a court, or a whole culture decide what happened to your body and write it down as fact, without ever asking you, if you have ever been handed a version of your own life and told to live inside it, then you already understand what is being done to her here, 20 centuries deep. Tell me below if you have felt that. I read every comment, and this is exactly the conversation I want to be having down there. Then come back, because the case is only half built. Now to the strangest exhibit of all, the one that should have ended the debate 2,000 years ago, and somehow ended nothing. There was no snake. Nobody found it. Nobody produced it. The one physical object that would prove the entire story, the actual serpent in the actual room, is precisely the thing that is missing from the actual room. And the ancient sources know it. This is the part that stunned me when I first read it properly, because we are always told Plutarch and Cassius Dio are the authorities for the snake. And when you go and read what they actually wrote, both of them tell you, in their own words, that they do not know how she died. Here is Plutarch in the life of Antony, and I am going to give it to you almost exactly as he wrote it. But what really took place is known to no one, for it was also said that she carried poison in a hollow comb and kept the comb hidden in her hair, and yet neither spot nor other sign of poison broke out upon her body. Moreover, not even was the reptile seen within the chamber. Read that again. The fullest ancient source we have, the man whose account gave us most of the scene, is telling you flatly, no one knows. He floats a poison hidden in a comb. He admits no snake was ever seen. And then he tells you where the snake reading even came from. There were 2 faint punctures on Cleopatra's arm, and it was these that Caesar, that is Octavian, seemed to believe. The snake was not a finding. It was Octavian's interpretation of 2 small marks. Remember that. Octavian is the source of the snake, not the evidence. Octavian. And Cassius Dio, the other great authority, is no more certain. No one knows clearly in what way she perished, Dio writes, for the only marks on her body were slight pricks on the arm. Then he offers you 2 mechanisms and cannot choose between them. An asp hidden in a jar or among flowers, or a poisoned pin she scratched into her own skin. 2 theories, from the man supposedly reporting the fact, and he shrugs. So look at what we are actually left with at the scene. 2 faint marks on an arm, that is it. That is the entire physical evidence. And 2 small punctures are consistent with a snake bite, but they are just as consistent with a poisoned pin, which Dio himself suggests, or a needle, or a lancet, or a hollow comb, which Plutarch himself suggests. 2 marks prove a wound. They do not prove a snake. The storytellers found a blank, 2 little pricks and a dead queen, and they filled it with the most beautiful thing they could think of. And here is the detail that tells you the doubt is not some modern skeptic's invention projected backward onto a clean, ancient certainty. The earliest surviving source of all, Strabo, a geographer who was alive at the time and may even have been in Egypt around then, already gives 2 versions, an asp or a poisonous ointment. From the very beginning, before the legend hardened, the people closest to the event could not agree on how she died. The uncertainty is original. The snake is the thing that grew over it. That is our scoreboard so far, and let me run it, because it is starting to get heavy. Number 1, the snake is too big for the basket. Number 2, a cobra fails to inject venom 9 times in 10. No one stakes a controlled death on it. Number 3, one snake cannot kill 3 women in one room, but 1 poisoned cup can. Number 4, a real cobra death is slow and disfiguring, the opposite of the serene body described, and now the one that hangs over all of them. There was no snake in the room, and the 2 historians we trust for the story both wrote, in plain words, that no one knows. 5 cracks. And we have not yet asked the most important question in any death. the question every detective asks first: who benefits? Because there is a man standing just off the edge of this scene, and everything, the war, the propaganda, the timing, the parade that comes after, runs through him. His name, at this point in the story, is Octavian. To understand what Octavian needed, you have to understand what Cleopatra actually was, not the seductress of the legend, but the sovereign the legend was built to bury. And I want to spend a moment here, because it is the whole reason this story was worth lying about. Strip away the serpent and the seduction, and do not hand me a resume. Put her where she actually stood. It is the 2nd of September, 31 BC, off the coast of western Greece, and the sea battle that will decide who owns the world is turning the wrong way. Cleopatra is not waiting in a palace for a messenger. She is at Actium, on the water, in the line, in command of her own squadron, some 60 ships flying her colours, and her on the deck of the flagship, reading the battle as it breaks apart around her. The classicist, Dwayne Roller, does not dress it up. She was a naval commander who led her own fleet in battle. When that squadron cuts loose and runs for Egypt, people have argued for 2,000 years over whether it was panic or a fleet pulled out on purpose to fight another day. But argue it either way, and you have already conceded the only thing that matters here. That is a head of state on the deck of her flagship, making a battlefield call at sea, in the smoke, with the world on the line. Not a courtesan with a fan, an admiral in the line. Now walk her off that deck and into a throne room in Alexandria on an ordinary working day of government, where a delegation of Egyptians has come before her. For 300 years the Ptolemies, Greeks and Macedonians sitting on the throne of Egypt, had spoken to their own subjects through interpreters, because not one of them, in 3 centuries, had ever bothered to learn the language of the people they ruled. Cleopatra answers the delegation in Egyptian. She is the first of her entire dynasty to do it, and Egyptian is only one tongue on the list. Plutarch, who is no fan of hers, records that she could turn from an Ethiopian to an Arab, to a Hebrew, to a Mede, to a Parthian, and meet each one in his own language, rarely reaching for an interpreter at all. Around 9 languages. That is not the trick of a temptress. That is a sovereign who worked out that the way you hold an empire together is to be able to look every subject and every rival in the eye in their own words. And that is only the front of the toolkit. The biographer Stacy Schiff put it plainly. This was a woman who knew how to build a fleet, suppress a revolt, control a currency, and relieve a famine, minting coin in her own name and her own face, ruling as pharaoh in one language and a Greek queen in the other, the living goddess Isis, governing 2 whole cultures at once, and raising 4 children she was positioning as the future of an entire Eastern world. That is who Octavian was at war with. Not a courtesan, a rival power with a treasury, a navy, a dynasty, and a genius for holding it all together. And you do not beat an enemy like that only on the water. You have to beat her in the story too. So keep her real face in your mind, the administrator, the commander, the linguist, the mother, because the version we inherited, the snake and the seductress, is the version her enemy needed you to see instead. That substitution is not my theory. That substitution is the case. Here is Octavian's problem in the summer of 30 BC, and it is a genuine trap, so follow it carefully. He has won. Antony is dead. Alexandria is his. But he has a defeated queen on his hands, and he needs 3 different things from her that do not fit together. First, he wants her alive. This is documented, not guessed. Suetonius and Dio both say Octavian worked hard to keep Cleopatra breathing because he wanted her for his triumph, the great victory parade back in Rome, where the defeated are marched through the streets. Dio says he was anxious to seize her alive and carry her back for that parade. He posts guards on her. He sends an officer, Proculaeus, to trick his way into the mausoleum and physically stop her from killing herself or burning herself alive with her treasure. And, This is the detail that settles it. When it looks like she may be dying, Octavian sends for the Scilly, the North African snake charmers reputed to suck venom from a wound, to try to revive her. Sit with that. A man who wanted Cleopatra dead does not send for the men whose whole job is to save snakebite victims. He wanted her alive. That is not in dispute. And here is something few people seem to consider about those last days, and it is worth stopping on, because it changes the picture the legend hands you. She is being held in a sealed stone building in Alexandria in August. Reason it out from the facts we already have. Egyptian August on the coast is thick, wet heat, and stone holds the day's warmth long into the night. And this is a chamber she had barricaded and packed with treasure, shut against the Romans. So the air in that room is not the cool, fragrant, golden couch air of the paintings. It is close and still and stifling, the kind of heat you feel on your skin before anyone in the room has said a word. That is not a detail anyone recorded. It is just what the date and the building make true. And there is a second thing the legend scrubs out. Antony has been dead only days. She has been ill. Plutarch describes her feverish, beating and tearing at her own breast in grief, refusing food. Put those established facts together in that sealed August room, and the inference builds itself. This is not a serene queen on perfumed linen. It is a hot, shut room that smells of sickness and mourning, and a body worn down by days of it. The indignity is not in any of that. The indignity is in the gap, in how hard the story worked to paint fragrance and calm over a woman who was grieving herself to pieces in the heat, because a serene queen serves the legend and a suffering one does not. But, and here is the trap closing, a living Cleopatra in his parade was dangerous, because Rome had done this before, and it had gone badly. Julius Caesar had once paraded Cleopatra's own sister, Arsinoe, through Rome in chains, a royal woman, humiliated in the street, and the crowd had not jeered. The crowd had pitied her. The sympathy had turned on Caesar. Now imagine Cleopatra herself, more famous, more dignified, a mother, dragged down the same street. The risk was not that Rome would hate her. The risk was that Rome would love her. A breathing queen might win the crowd. And a murdered queen was worse still. Kill her openly, and you make her a martyr, and yourself a tyrant who was afraid of a woman in chains. So look at the box Octavian is standing in. He needs her defeat to be public. He cannot safely parade her alive. He cannot afford to be seen killing her. He needs her gone, and he needs his own hands to look clean. And now, look what her death does. A Cleopatra who destroys herself solves every single one of those problems at once. Rome's hands are clean because she chose it. The dangerous, sympathetic living queen is gone, and the manner of it, exotic, Eastern, a woman undone by the serpent of her own strange kingdom, feeds the exact propaganda he had been selling Rome for years, that this was never a Roman civil war against Antony, but a foreign war against a decadent Eastern seductress. Her suicide does not just remove her, it confirms his story about her. Whether Octavian arranged her death, allowed it, or simply seized on it and made it his, the death served him so completely that he could not have designed it better if he had written it himself. And here is the plant I need you to hold, because it is the one that detonates at the very end. Octavian, remember, wanted to parade the queen, and could not. So in his triumph in Rome, he paraded the next best thing. Cassius Dio records it. In the victory procession, they carried an effigy, an image of the dead Cleopatra on a couch, with the asp shown clinging to her arm. Say that back to yourself slowly. The snake made its first public appearance in history not at the scene of her death. Nobody ever produced it there, but as a painted, built prop in Octavian's parade, held up over the streets of Rome as a picture of how the story was to be told. The serpent was public art before it was ever a fact. Octavian showed Rome the snake. Then Octavian's writers wrote it down. Remember the effigy. We are coming back to it. And there is a reason it was a snake specifically. And not poison, not a blade. A reason so neat it is almost a confession. The cobra was not just any deadly animal to an Egyptian. It was the uraeus, the rearing cobra that sits on the brow of the pharaoh's crown, the goddess Wadjet, the risen one, the emblem of Egyptian kingship and divine protection itself. Cleopatra wore it. In some of her images, she wears a rare triple version of it, unique to her. So a death by cobra reads, to anyone who knows Egypt, as Egypt's own royal serpent, rising up to claim her, divine, foreign, self-consuming. It is the perfect symbol, and a symbol that perfect, arriving exactly when the victor needs it, tied to exactly the iconography that makes her look like a strange Eastern thing, rather than a rival Roman power. That is not the fingerprint of an accident. That is the fingerprint of a message. Because think about who actually wrote all of this down. Every single narrative source we have flows through Octavian's Rome, or the empire he founded. Horace, who fixes the brave serpent death in verse, is Augustus's own court poet. Strabo, Plutarch, Suetonius, Dio, all of them write inside, or downstream of, the regime Octavian built. There is no surviving Egyptian account. There is no pro-Cleopatran source, not one. The history of her death was written entirely by the side that won, led by the one man on earth who most needed a particular version of it to be true. History, here, is not just written by the victor as a figure of speech. It is written by the victor, and the victor had a motive. That is a hard thing to sit with, so let me put it in human terms for a second. If you have ever been remembered for the worst thing someone else decided to say about you, if the loudest version of your story is the one told by the person you lost to, then you know something in your gut that took historians 2,000 years to argue on paper. The person who beats you gets to describe you. Comment below if you have watched that happen, to you, or to a woman you know who was blamed for something that was never hers to control. Tell me. I read them all. Then stay with me, because we are almost at the answer, and first I have to clear the other suspects off the table. Because I owe you honesty. And honesty means I do not get to just declare the snake fake and hand you my favorite theory. Before I tell you what most likely happened, I have to walk through the other explanations that people reach for, and knock them down in order, so that when the real one is left standing, you can see it was the last one standing, not the one I liked best. Wrong version number 1. The pure, noble, freely chosen snake suicide, exactly as the legend tells it. The queen, undefeated in spirit, choosing the sacred serpent as her dignified exit. We have already walked this one down in that room, plank by plank, so let me just gather the wreckage off the floor. The cobra is too big to have come up those stairs. It fails to envenomate 9 times in 10. It cannot have crossed that room and killed all 3 women where they fell. The body it leaves is rotted and slow, not the sleeping queen they found on the couch. And it was never in the room to begin with. Nobody ever saw it. Stand over the 3 bodies, and the noble asp suicide is the least likely thing that could have put them there. It is beautiful, and it is almost certainly not what killed them. Cross it off. Wrong version number 2, that it was still a snake, but an accident, or a different, smaller, more efficient snake, or some cleverer smuggling than a fruit basket. This is the version for people who feel the basket is silly but cannot let go of the serpent, because the serpent is the image. But every problem that sinks version 1 sinks this one too, and the 3 bodies sink it hardest. Change the snake, change the hiding place. You still cannot get one reptile to deliver 3 reliable, lethal, fully envenomated bites to 3 women in one short window in one small room. Iris at her feet, Kar Meon at the diadem, the queen on the couch. No single serpent, elegant or clumsy, leaves that floor. Whatever killed Cleopatra killed all 3 of them the same way, at nearly the same moment, and no snake in any version does that. So the serpent comes off the table in every form it has. Cross it off, which leaves exactly 2 possibilities standing: her own poison, or Octavian's hand, and those are the only two that were ever really on the table. Plutarch's hidden poison, Dio's poisoned pin, Strabo's ointment all point one way. Octavian's motive, his guards, his need, and his effigy point the other. So let me give you the answer, the honest answer, ranked, with nothing hidden. Here it is, the thing 3 women drank in that room. Not a snake, a cup. A prepared cup of poison, mixed to kill and mixed to be certain, and passed between Cleopatra and Irus and Charmion in the same hour. The cup that killed all 3. That is what this whole file has been walking toward. And it is not a shrug of uncertainty. It is a thing that can be named. The strongest reconstruction we have comes from the German historian Christoph Schäfer of the University of Trier, working with the toxicologist Dietrich Mebs. In 2010, they went back through the pharmacology the ancient world actually had, and they named what was in the cup, a cocktail of plant poisons Egypt knew and trusted, opium and hemlock and aconytum, which is wolfsbane. Opium to make it painless, hemlock and wolfsbane to make it sure. A mixture understood in antiquity to bring a quiet death within a few hours, with no convulsions to show and no wound to find. As Schäfer put it, opium is quiet. With it, you fall into a deadly sleep. That is the cup. Now, I owe you the one honest hedge this deserves, and it is the only one, so let me give it to you plainly, and then set it down. We cannot exhume her, and no one ever will, so no one can run the toxicology on the body itself. That is the single thing we cannot do. But everything in that room points one way. The cup is not the answer we got stuck with when the snake failed. It is the answer that was sitting under the snake the whole time. Now watch how that one cup reaches back and pays off every debt this video has been running. Every number on the scoreboard. I told you I would run them all again at once. Here they are, all of them, through this single answer. Number 1, the snake too big for the basket. Gone, because there was no snake. A small vial of prepared poison hides in a comb, in a jar, in the folds of a dress, in a way no 8-foot cobra ever could. Number 2, the cobra that fails 9 times in 10. Gone, because a measured dose of opium and hemlock and wolfsbane does not fail. It is not a coin flip, it is a certainty, which is exactly what a sovereign, choosing her own controlled end, would demand. Number 3, the impossible 3 deaths. This is where it detonates. A shared draft kills 3 women where a shared snake never could. Cleopatra, Irus, Charmion, 3 cups, or 1 cup passed between them, dead in the same hour by the same means. The 3 bodies were never evidence for a snake. They were always evidence for a poison, and everyone who told the snake story just quietly forgot to count all 3. Number 4, the serene, unmarked body. Gone, because a quiet opium death gives you exactly that. No necrosis, no paralysis, no disfigurement. A woman who looks asleep. The serene corpse never fit the cobra. It fits the cup perfectly, and the missing snake, and Plutarch's hidden comb, and Dio's poisoned pin, and Strabo's ointment. Every one of them was the truth trying to surface through 2,000 years of a prettier lie. They were all pointing at poison the whole time. So that is the likeliest answer, and it is more consistent with every scrap of evidence than the snake has ever been. But I promised you the full spectrum, and there is one more possibility, further out, that I will not pretend is proven, but I will not pretend away either. That is Octavian's hand. The criminal profiler Pat Brown, applying crime reconstruction method, argued outright that Cleopatra did not kill herself at all, that she was a prisoner, killed on Octavian's orders, with the suicide staged over her body to let him take Egypt with clean hands. Now, mainstream classicists do not accept that, and I am not going to sell it to you as fact. It sits at the far, provocative end of the spectrum, but it is worth naming for one reason. It says the quiet part out loud. It puts the motive on the table where it belongs. Octavian needed her dead. He was in the room's history at every turn. And whether he killed her, let her die, or simply seized her death and dressed it in a serpent, the story that came out the other end was his story, and it served him perfectly. And that, not the exact chemistry of her last hour, is the thing I can tell you for certain, and it is the thing I most want you to carry out of this video. We may never know precisely how Cleopatra died, but we can show, beyond reasonable doubt, that the way we were told she died is not true. And now look hard at what the snake actually is, because it is not a neutral mistake. It is a brand. The snake is the one answer that came from her enemy and no one else, displayed first as a built prop in his own triumph, the effigy of the dead queen with the asp shown at her arm, carried through the streets of Rome, and only then written down by his own poets. The same propaganda machine that stamped the word whore across her life stamped that serpent across her death. The exotic Eastern seductress and the exotic Eastern snake are not two separate charges. They are one charge, told by one man for one reason, which means they come off together. Pull the serpent off her death, and the seductress comes off her life with it, because they were never two stories. They were one story, and it was his. She was destroyed twice by the same hand, once at Actium, on the water, by his navy, and once in the library, on the page, by his story, the story that took a pharaoh, an admiral, a diplomat, a mother, and left us a snake and a whore. So debunking the serpent is not just correcting a cause of death, it is taking his mask off her face. The cup gives her back her death. Losing the snake gives her back her life. That is the injustice, and I am not going to hedge that part, because that part is not uncertain. The forensics of her death are debatable. The erasure of her life is not. The effigy in the triumph is documented. The absence of any Egyptian voice is documented. The motive is documented. What was done to her memory is the one thing in this entire case that is not in doubt. So let me ask you to do something that the record never did. Imagine being her. Imagine 22 years holding the wealthiest kingdom on the Mediterranean together against a power that wanted to swallow it. Building fleets, feeding a starving people, minting your own coin, speaking 9 languages so you could look every subject and every rival in the eye, in their own words. Imagine being one of perhaps a handful of people alive who could actually run a country that size, and being a woman in a world that had decided a woman running a country was itself a kind of obscenity. Imagine losing, narrowly, at sea, to a younger man with a better admiral. And then imagine the worst part, not the losing, the remembering. Imagine knowing, in that hot sealed room with the guards on the stairs, that the man who beat you would now get to tell everyone who you had been, that he would erase the fleet and the coinage and the languages and the children and leave behind a woman on a couch with a snake at her breast. A warning, an exotic cautionary tale, a seductress who got what seductresses get. 2,000 years, and until very recently it worked. That is what he did to her. That is the sentence she has actually been serving. And there is one more thing about that room that I keep coming back to, because it cannot be shown and it changes everything. She did not die in private. The whole reason the guards were there was to keep her alive for the parade, which means, on the other side of that door, a few feet away, stood the soldiers of the man who had beaten her, listening, waiting to march her to Rome. Reason it out. Her last hour was spent within earshot of her captors, close enough to hear armor shift and sandals scrape on stone. She did not slip away alone in the dark. She made her choice a room's width from the men sent to stop her from making it. That is not a sound you can put on a screen. It is only the awareness of it, and it is the whole meaning of what she did. Here is where I want to leave you standing, in that chamber, with the heat still coming off the stone, the diadem straight on her brow, the 2 women beside her, the Roman sandals scraping on the other side of the door. That is real. Whatever was in the cup, she died a few feet from her captors, on her own terms, refusing the parade. The one thing every version agrees on is that she took the ending away from him. He got Egypt. He got the history. He did not get to march her through Rome. She saw to that. So I want to know where you land, because there is a genuine argument here, and you now have the whole file. Was it the snake, exactly as Rome told it? Was it her own poison, the quiet cup, the likeliest answer, the one that fits everybody in the room? Or do you read it the third way, all the way out at the edge, Octavian's hand, and the serpent laid over her afterward like a mask? Snake, her own poison, or his hand? Tell me which one you believe, and, more than that, tell me why. I read every single comment on these. This is exactly the kind of argument I love having with you down there. And now the door I told you I would open. Cleopatra and Antony were buried together, in royal state, on Octavian's own order, and that tomb has never been found. For most of 2,000 years, the assumption was that it lies under old Alexandria's royal quarter, which is now largely under the sea and under the modern city, drowned by earthquakes and time. But for the last 2 decades, a Dominican archaeologist and lawyer named Kathleen Martinez has been digging somewhere else entirely, at Taposiris Magna, a temple town on the coast west of Alexandria, dedicated to Isis, the goddess Cleopatra claimed as her own. Her theory is that a queen who called herself the living Isis, and who did not want to lie in a Roman-occupied city, might have been laid to rest in Isis's own temple, out of Octavian's reach. And this is not a crank hunt. The dig has produced coins with Cleopatra's face by the 100, a limestone bust, foundation deposits from her own dynasty, and in 2022, a rock-cut tunnel over 1,000 meters long, running deep underground toward the sea, and, more recently, a sunken harbor off the coast, and a statue Martinez believes may be the queen herself. She has not found the tomb. Not yet, but she has found the doorway to it, and there is one thing that tunnel is pointed at that I am not going to tell you tonight. That is the next file. Everyone tells that story wrong. They either declare the tomb found when it isn't, or they laugh the search off as a fantasy when the finds are real and dated and sitting in a museum. I won't do either. I'll see you in the next one. If this changed how you see her, if the snake and the seductress look different to you now than they did an hour ago, then subscribe, so the next case finds you. This is what this channel is. The woman under the cartoon, the ruler under the slander, the file reopened. And do me one last small thing. Tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city or your country in the comments. It never stops amazing me how far these stories travel, and how many of them turn out to be the same story wearing different crowns. They were never cursed, they were never mad, they were never barren, they were women the record was afraid of, and the file is finally open.